Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. And given the recent Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard, it seems almost inevitable that the CDL in its current form will disappear over the next couple of years, and the franchise teams will almost certainly be phased out, potentially back to a CWL-esque environment. Methodz has raised the question though as to the salaries the players have been making over the last few years and what that looks like post-CDL. Are they going to go back to the dark ages and making absolutely nothing but their prize earnings? Do players seriously need to cash in now before the salaries massively go down, or will it actually maintain a pretty high level as it was in around about 2019 before the CDL even came around? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, after all the controversy over the last couple of days with Doug Censor Martin, he has confirmed that he's not going to be doing the PC ranked thing anymore. I think, the N-bomb drama was enough to tip Doug over the edge, really. I mean, he dropped the other word a couple of days before that, and then this was, he apologised, and then the other one was it for Doug. So as he says, after playing PC ranked for 2 years, #1 for 2 seasons, catching thousands of cheaters, which, this is the cheating content that he does, right? Because he goes in and obviously... Okay, some of the people he plays are cheating, definitely. Some of them probably are not. But nonetheless, if he thinks that everyone's cheating, then it makes it better content. I get it. And as he says, catching thousands of cheaters, I'm officially playing on console full-time with anti-cheat. Well, until anti-cheat actually works, because you can cheat on console, but it's much more difficult, and generally it doesn't really happen. And this is another thing as well about the CWL return, if we're even going to get that. But when the CDL is over, what it kind of looks like. And there's, I don't know if console's ever going to come back. It probably won't. But, Microsoft, Xbox, stuff like this, maybe there's a chance that they think about it. Because a lot of people have said that since we moved away from console onto PC, there's been lots of issues associated with that, which is definitely true. Is that the future? Is that the way things will continue to be? Probably yes. But I wouldn't say that it's out of the realms of possibility that COD returns to being like a console-based FPS game. Okay, it's obviously kind of comes from console, it's still going to be played on a controller, but you kind of get what I mean. Maybe Microsoft have to think about that if they can't put together a real good functioning anti-cheat, which still doesn't really exist. And Doug goes on to say, I can say with confidence, it's awful on your mental, and it's an environment I do not wish to be a part of moving forwards. And, for good reasons, brings out the worst in myself, don't enjoy being in a vulnerable situation. So, yeah, he's kind of calling it a day on the cheating content a bit, although having gone to console, I'm sure he might found a couple or another. And probably a good idea that we get Doug off Modern Warfare 2 ranked at the moment, given what's happened over the last couple of days. And as Doug says, hopefully they can see this, like Trek and stuff, and try and do something. And sure, but I don't know how much Trek can really do on this, right? Because it's not necessarily them that's designed the anti-cheat, which doesn't really seem to always work particularly well. Doug goes on to talk about the cheating content, and, they're also on console, but not nearly as bad as PC, and maybe it'll be a better scenario for him. And he does say that, look, he can quad stack with literal CDL MVPs and lose to Crimsons. On console, I solo queue and beat 250 quad stacks. That alone validates that more than 50% of all PC lobbies are cheaters. I guess it depends what kind of rank you're in, whether this is true. But yeah, definitely intrigued to your thoughts on that. Does your experience validate that, like, half your lobbies have cheaters in? Or is, Doug just seeing someone snap on him pretty nice and think that the guy's cheating? I think there's a bit of an in-between ground where Doug definitely does find a lot of legitimate cheaters, but when you start to think everybody's cheating, you start to see skeletons, where they may not necessarily exist. This also quickly between Drazah and Slasher, kind of obviously going to be interesting to see between these two this season. Slasher and Drazah will definitely want to beat each other, right? I mean, Slasher's gone to Boston after getting dropped by FaZe. Drazah comes in as his replacement, so I'm sure there's going to be something between them a little bit when they play each other. Now, Drazah did say that, I think he's done this a few times now, Drazah grinds so much of the games and does so many 8s lobbies and tournaments and chals and everything on these titles. Like Black Ops 3 it was initially, then everyone went back to Cold War, and he grinded so hard that everyone's just said, you know what, Drazah, like, you can have your money, like, we'll call it a day here. But, Sasha says, with time to revive it. People aren't doing anything. They're waiting for the new game to come out, and it's not like X-Defiant dropped to the perfect moment to capitalize on this little bit of downtime before the game launches. Now, a couple of days ago, we've seen big rumors that the Overwatch League is effectively going to end. And this has been a feeling for some time that, you know, when these leagues started, we gave them, what, 5 years maybe until they were going to call it a day. And that's kind of what we're seeing right here. Now, and obviously Jake Hell said the other day that almost certainly we will see the waiving of the outstanding entry fees for the CDL teams. What that looks like, how much that actually is, we just don't know those figures. But it seems to be a way for Activision, and of course it's not really even Activision anymore, it's going to be Microsoft, but, you know, the decision makers will be overturned over the coming months to say, look, you know, this didn't really work out as we planned it to. Okay, you paid us $25 million. That wasn't really good value for money. So we're going to waive those fees and it's all going to be fine. And in the Overwatch League, they're paying an additional $6 million just to tell them to be like, look, just have this money and go away type thing. And we'll do it a different way going forward. Now, there's always going to be some form of competitive play. When there's something like this, where there's people that want to play, there's people that want to watch, some sort of esports is always going to exist. And I feel like Microsoft will support it. They're probably not going to support it with a $300 million league like Activision did, but you can argue whether that really did support it or whether it actually had some negative consequences. But when the CDL did arrive, there's absolutely no doubt at all that the amount of money that came flooding in was immense, right? I mean, the players are making big money because all the sports guys came in, started paying mega salaries for these guys, to such an extent there was even a salary cap that was put on before they realized they couldn't even, I think, legally uphold the salary cap. We'll get onto that in a second. But as Methodz says, the salaries the last few years have been pretty crazy, and some players right now are still making them. On the top teams, the OpTics, the FaZes, there's still big money being thrown around, no doubt. And some teams such as OpTic can actually afford that with some of the revenues and sponsorship and stuff they actually have. But some teams definitely cannot, and therefore we're seeing more and more players every year, I think, step down to the minimum salary already. Then, if the CDL was to disappear and we were to go back to a different format where there's maybe no minimum salary, could be in for a very different time.
Will we ever make a return? I mean, it's an impossible question to answer. I really don't know. I can't see the future. You never know what's going to happen, but the top players, look, I mean, yeah, top players, of course, depending on the organization you play for and how good you are and how sought after you are. Salaries, of course, like, you're still going to have players making crazy salaries, but on average, like, dude, the average salary in the beginning of the CDL or up until this upcoming year has, I mean, it's been crazy.
So one of the positive things for the league in theory when the CDL came around was that there is actually some form of minimum salary. The players are guaranteed money. Unfortunately, the contracts never really favoured the players much. For example, if you're on Gorillas or any other team, okay, sure, you're meant to get paid $58,000, whatever it was, this most recent season. But if they sign you for a month or two and then drop you, they just have a clause in the contract which basically allows them to fire you for any reason. And if they decide to do that, you don't get paid for the rest of the year. So it sounded like it was good for players. The reality is not necessarily. But what certainly was good for players was, especially year one at MW19, when all the sports owners came in and aches, I don't know what aches was on, 350k, maybe something like that. The Seattle Surge guys were on over 300. All of those guys like aBeZy, Karma, Slack to Nable, and Octane, of course, their entire team was pushing the maximum salary. And the maximum salary, the salary cap, I think maybe including the coach, was meant to be in like the $1.5, $1.6 million ballpark per season, which is obviously pretty mega. At the time, it was 5 players on a team. They then realized in 2021 or later on that due to, I think, California state law, they actually couldn't even uphold this, because if you're trying to employ a salary cap, you have to have like a counterparty to discuss with, and there was no players union, and there is no players union, so they couldn't actually uphold this eventually. So there maybe some teams went over this salary cap over the coming years as well. So no secret that some players, maybe Simp on FaZe, and you know, we don't really know what Scump's getting paid. I'm sure part of it is like a content creator related salary when he was competing, but we're talking $350, $400 plus $1,000 a year. And there's probably some players right now on those top teams that are still making money in and around that ballpark, right? Like, you know, I'm sure Pred signed an absolute supermax when he joined OpTic most recently, and you know, you wouldn't say that he doesn't deserve it. But you've got, you know, Pred making in a month probably not too far off what some of these players are making in an entire year when you consider the fact that oh, there's a minimum salary, but we might only employ you for 6 months because the season's only going to be around for 6 months. Not ideal. But the current circumstance for these players is definitely better than it was for the vast majority pre-CDL. If you look at the run-up to the CDL, right, in the CWL era, there was lots of talk recently from the players on what their salaries were. The big one, of course, was Zuma's 20k salary, and then after that, I think Scump got a pay rise as well, up to like 13 or whatever it was. They talked about it on a podcast recently. But even when Octane was on OpTic, like back in 2018, he was making $4.5 grand a month. LG pretty similar, 100T. They then bumped it up to like 10k. But you know, okay, that equates to a good 120k a year or whatever. But even then, if you're living in LA after taxes and everything, it doesn't exactly go awfully far, especially compared to when I think Octane was making probably, you know, 30k-ish a month, maybe a little bit less than that, but something in that ballpark, I think, at least, when he was on Seattle Surge in the first year of the CDL, and maybe the second year as well. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't that much. It's tough to say. It's not public knowledge unless they reveal it themselves. And even Zinni himself, who was in the clip a second ago, says that when he was on Rise, getting paid about 5k a month. Very respectable for the time. And this is what we see from Aches. And this is what you've got to respect, the players that grind it up, who were making zero salary for years. Even when they were on Complexity and when they were the best team in the game, they were getting paid $500 a month. And they thought that was, you know, they were balling out of control. This is where times were different because you couldn't survive off salary. It didn't exist. You had to survive off either sponsorship deals or mainly trying to actually win the tournaments. And look, the salaries quickly raised up, but even you're talking 2016, 2017, 2018, the salaries still weren't near really what a lot of the players were getting paid in the CDL. Now sure, 2019 things turned around, but this was the time where everything was in growth mode, right? It was up until 2019, 2020, 2021 where the money was coming flooding in, right? Teams like Envy, teams like OpTic, of course, you know, getting acquired by Infinite Esports and all the money's coming in and the VCs are investing and everything like this. So, you know, even pre-CDL, the money was on the up. However, nowadays, we have a lot of teams trying to drop that down somewhat. We know that Thieves are becoming more of a budget team already. And then when the CDL, let's say, does come to an end and something else returns, is there going to be a salary cap in place? What does the situation look like? Is it going to be like it is in Halo, where the guys over there aren't really doing crazy well? I don't know exactly what the salaries look like in Halo, but if you look at, you know, even just prize money, right? I mean, okay, Sentinels didn't have a great year, but they made between them, okay, let's say you split this 5 ways with a coach, 25 grand each from prize earnings. Okay, not bad, but they are one of the top teams. I think OpTic made in the ballpark, the OpTic Halo team of like maybe 400k between all of them. And of course they, you know, won at a couple of events, made a lot of finals, stuff like this. So definitely interesting to see how much that parallels what happens right now in Halo and also what the salaries look like. Because I think Methodz has a point to say, look guys, you know, make the most of it kind of while you can, because if you don't, then it's going to potentially disappear very soon. Now, what will that look like post-CDL? If that is indeed the case, it's difficult to say, but I definitely think some sort of regression to what might be, you know, considered fair. This is what Hex and others always says. Like, look, guys, you can't just get away with, you know, competing and making the bag and not making content, because when eventually the correction happens, as it probably will happen relatively soon with the state of esports in general, the lack of investment that people want to make in it right now, the esports winter, whatever you want to say, given the VCs and Cronky and all these guys are pulling out, you know, now's the time where the players that have built up their brands and continue to do so can actually capitalize on that to subsidize what they might have lost in pure salary with what they can make being a content creator. But, you know, some players are going to take advantage of this and some probably will not. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.